Welcome to Writer's Reading. This program is brought to you as a public service presentation on WPRG TV5, Harold, Kentucky. Today, I'm very proud to be taking the show in the York Mansion at Pikeville and to have as my special guest, Mrs. Imogene June Johnson. June, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Okay. What is it that you want to share with us today?
Well, I have a story about Sweet Georgia Brown. We've all heard the song about Sweet Georgia Brown. We've whistled it. We've heard it at ball games. We've heard it. I guess there isn't anybody in the United States that hasn't heard the song about Sweet Georgia Brown. And I have been researching to try to find out something about her. And I found out that she's from Betsy Layne and also lived in this area, has roots in this area. So this story is a newspaper article that I researched and wrote, and I can read the article to you. But she was a very interesting character, supposed to have had an affair, a lifelong affair with one of the Rockefellers. So it's kind of interesting to see what Sweet Georgia Brown did for Eastern Kentucky. We have the Hatfields and the McCoys, and we have lots of stories of Eastern Kentucky, but one that we have not brought out heretofore is Sweet Georgia Brown. And I'd like to take this opportunity to kind of introduce everybody to the real Sweet Georgia Brown.
Okay.
Would you like me to read it?
Mm-hmm.
Only the pyracantha bush that bent heavy-laden branches toward the southeast gave anything like a blossom to what seemed to be the loneliest marker at Johnson Memorial Cemetery on South Mayo Trail in Pike County. To the right were family plots seemingly unrelated to the person at whose grave I stared. On the left was no close stone. Clusters of surnames were all over the cemetery. Most of the monuments were petal-laden, but on the solitary plot of a lady whose name has been whistled in almost every household in America, Sweet Georgia Brown, there were no flowers. Beautiful, talented, focused, and grammatical, Georgia Lane Brown became a colorful figure whose accomplishments in singing and playing piano, songwriting, dancing, and interior decorating were known in America and Europe during the first half of the century. Where was the hometown of such a cultured lady? Cincinnati? New York? Philadelphia? New Orleans? None of the above. She was from a quiet little place just north of Pikeville, Kentucky, called Betsy Layne, named after one of her ancestors on her mother's side. The Lanes and Browns are two of the most historical settlers in the area. Georgia's cousin, Dick Lane, and his daughter, Gwen, who lived near the former Brown home, were instrumental in telling me the background. The secrets of Sweet Georgia Brown, a lady whose life and allegedly strong ties to the Rockefeller family often created waves, but they're mostly buried with her. No one in this generation knows what really happened. Members of the family that I interviewed are too young to remember much about her since she was born at the end of the last century. I suspect anyway that what they know is only the edge of the rainbow of her enigmatic life. She did not brag. She did not tattle. She did not bare her heart except to family and closest friends. The reasons were pure and simple. She was said to have been the mistress and the true love of a millionaire of millionaires, someone in the family of John D. Rockefeller, perhaps even John D. himself, though there is no longer any proof of this statement. Georgia Brown was born on Sunday, February the 10th, 1894, the only daughter of John and Belle Lane Brown. John and Belle had inherited large tracts of timber and coal, and for the first portion of their married life, they reaped the benefits of the virgin timber and coal deposits. Yet it was not on the farm setting that she was to continue. When she was in her teens, the family moved to Jenkins to run a hotel originally built by Consolidated Coal Company for the coal camp. Jenkins was an important stop. It was a connection from the south and east into the mountains. There was a layover for many people if they wanted to catch the early train into Pikeville, so the hotel, located just across the tracks from the depot, became a very important cog in the wheel of transportation to and from Letcher, Pike, and other counties. For a long time, there were very few roads going toward Pikeville, only muddy wagon trails that crossed dangerous creeks. Travelers were often stopped by obtuse property owners who put up barbed wire fences, wanting no traffic through their gardens. It was at the stage of state acquisition of property and the beginning of passable, safe dirt roads that Georgia's parents managed the hotel. Moreover, it was the only hotel for a short period of time, perhaps the first or second decade into the new century. Georgia was one of the loveliest ladies of her time, with her mannequin figure in the prime of girlhood. The tresses were modernly styled, fresh from the pages of the day's fashion magazine. As she crossed and uncrossed her perfect rounded legs and artlessly moved without any intent to dazzle, her courting suitors grew. Georgia not only had a streamlined figure, she was a streamlined pianist. She could put on a show, dancing and singing and playing. Her performances were under the strict supervision of her doting parents, of course. Admirers from long distances traveled to see her. Lucille Pinson of Pikeville, a cousin, said young men from Shelby walked all the way to Jenkins on a Saturday night to hear her or to have a chance to dance with her. When her parents chaperoned small song and dance parties at the hotel, there was little option for most girls of that time to meet high-class men. Georgia, however, at the front desk, was first in line to become gracefully and tastefully acquainted with top-drawer men who might arrive. Georgia's best friend, who started out with her and was her friend all her life, was Myrtle Bentley, a relative of Lucille, another lady with whom Georgia sang. Georgia's protective parents refused to allow her to see any suitor alone. One by one, the gentlemen were inspected and dismissed, as if no one were good enough for Georgia. Locked away in a small town in Appalachia, not one in the area seemed to fit the capricious young woman. It was to this scene that, according to legend, a wealthy entrepreneur ventured into the area. The Rockefellers had already started the Standard Oil Company, which for a while controlled 95% of the oil refining business in the country and had, in addition, substantial interests in lumber tracts and transportation, namely the railroad. No one knows why such an important man came himself to the area, unless he wanted to take his ornate railroad coach, which had everything built in like a classy modern mobile home, and see America. Could he also locate a few bargains of timber, land, or coal along the way? When the train pulled into the terminal at Jenkins, it would bring a merger of a different nature from what either the visitor or Georgia intended. Meeting the man we shall simply call Rockefeller at the door was a most charming little co-hostess. The homey Old South hospitality and cooking would have been different to him, special and unique as the place itself. Georgia, with young men following her up the street and down, would have been difficult to snare. Yet she might have been the one to make him roar with laughter around the parlor fireplace as she told him stories of the area, rolling her eyes upward and gesturing with an honesty and frankness that he might never find in Washington or New York. What did he think when he saw the Kentucky lady perform? Did he promise her a chance at a singing career? Georgia did not set out to trap him. Was it the other way around? All we know is that in the next scenario of Georgia's life, she's in New York, according to her family, in an estate presumably provided by Rockefeller. She quickly became the toast of the town, and it was at this time that a song was composed for her by Bernie, Pinkard, and Casey. I am sure that as time went by, if she had wanted to be a movie star, she had a ticket to stardom. The girl from Betsy Layne evidently never wanted to go any farther than she did with the stage, although she continued to play and sing publicly and surrounded herself with musicians and songwriters. Was it a matter of time before she would find herself unhappy to take second place to the man she loved? Was the stealth more than she could bear? For he was a married man. Did he promise that someday he would get a divorce? Was that what happened? Was that what kept her hanging on? Her parents would never approve of a relationship in lieu of a marriage. Perhaps many a lover's quarrel erupted over the issues. She became occupied for a time with being a hostess for performing artists, for herself, for show people, or for perhaps even Rockefeller. Also, she made every effort to pursue humanitarian interests because the Rockefellers were in the process of philanthropic enterprises, such as the $400 million they had given to the foundation of Williamsburg, Virginia. Although Georgia gave her heart to a legally married man whose bonds were seemingly too involved to sever, she was not what you might think. She was not a loose woman. Conversely, her morality was tied into the old East Kentucky mores of a one-man woman. Perhaps it was after another confrontation of, "Why is it taking you so long to get your divorce?" that she hastily married another man, a shoe polish magnate, according to Myrtle House. She soon divorced him. No one knows precisely what happened or why the marriage did not work, or if she left this man because there were jealous episodes from Rockefeller to try to get her back. Although Georgia moved to Florida, her continental occupation as a decorator often took her abroad. Norma Lane said once in a bet on a dog race, she lost a lovely grand home. All she did, as I think back, was to walk out and say, "Here it is," and buy another one. Of course, her parents were very wealthy in their own right, and she had plenty of money on her own. Building a home in Miami, she had a glassed-in section of a huge bedroom that contained only formals. Norma continued, "During World War II, we visited to find that Georgia was feeding her cat canned salmon, which was hard to get in those days of rationing, feeding it to her cat. It tickled me to see all the strange things she had that we had never seen before." Besides that, Myrtle House said back home she also had a home with her parents, to which she would come and go, near the fire station at Betsy Layne, taken when the road was built. The house was taken. In that house, lights would come on when you opened a door at that house, even in that time. Once Georgia gave us a picture, which a friend of hers had painted. She still has that picture. Zella Mae Pruitt from Pikeville, whose father was a brother to Georgia's mother, said, "It is my understanding that Rockefeller requested that the song Sweet Georgia Brown be played at his funeral. It was Zella who provided me with a copy of a small, rare, priceless portrait of Georgia. Georgia ordained that Pike County was the best place to grow old, however, and when the affair either was stopped by death or burned out or otherwise, she came home. She and a partner put in a coal tipple on Klein Street in Pikeville. For a while after the death of her parents, she lived at the Pinson Hotel. Then, as old age crept closer, she moved to a little house in front of Dr. W.C. Hambly on Cumberland Court to live quietly among her souvenirs of the past. Too many relatives to ignore said that Georgia had a baby, but no one ever knew what happened to the baby. Did he die? Was he reared by the Rockefellers? Was he quietly adopted? Why did she not tell where he was buried if he had died? Her silence and the absence of a known gravesite leaves us with many missing pieces to the puzzle. The riddle remains unsolved. I worked at Pikeville College when I learned that the life-size, magnificent painting of Sweet Georgia Brown with her streamlined elk hounds and several of her ornate pieces of silver had been given to the college as a gift. They were on display at the Harmon Alumni House for a brief period. For some reason, officials took issue with showing the portrait. It was ordered to be taken down, packed, and shipped out. I never knew where. Someday I hope that we can find more reasons why Sweet Georgia Brown came back to die alone. in Pikeville, or more about her son. But for now, when you hear the strains of the song composed for her by the songwriting friends, just remember the story of the sweet girl from Betsy Layne who was pursued by a millionaire and spent her life waiting for marriage vows that never came.
Wow. I didn't know. I knew the song, but I didn't really know a woman named Georgia Brown existed, let alone that she lived around here. That's
Well, I'm
interesting.
just about ready to write the second version of the story, the second part of the story. I have learned so much more since I found out about this.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much narrowed down as to who the baby was, which one of the Rockefellers was her baby.
Wow. It's like a fairy tale.
Yes, I really think we need to make a movie of that
I was
story.
thinking that when we were reading it. That would be great.
I hope someday we'll be able to do that, and maybe show where she grew up, and also as tourism projects.
Mhm.
And in Jenkins, I went up to Jenkins to find the hotel, and they were tearing it down at the time that I got up there. So I know where it is, but really we could all benefit by exposing some of those things to the public and letting them come in for tourism purposes. I think it would help us.
Oh, I do too. There are a lot of people from this area, people who are still alive, that I just don't think we make good use of all the things that we have around here.
I agree. I do hope we can bring Georgia's story out.
Oh, I do too, and thank you for bringing it to us today.
Thank you for letting me do it. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Imogene June Johnson for being on the show today, and also for allowing us to take the show in the York Mansion. I want to thank Mr. Eugene Cisco for taping the show for us, and Dr. Don for allowing us to bring it to you. Until next week, may God bless you.